Hey, what's up guys? So today we'll take a look at what studying for exams in PT School looks like for me, and I'll also be sharing some studying strategies that I have developed over the years, as well as some useful apps that I use on my iPad to study for every exam. But if this is your first time on my channel, my name is Jin. I'm a second year DPT student and I post every week on just about anything related to physical therapy. So if that's something that sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing and liking this video. So for every exam, I try to go over the exam material at least twice. If I have some time left at the end, I like doing a quick review, but that rarely happens. But this 3-step process that I'm about to introduce to you guys has worked for me so far. So let's dive right in. So this is the app that I use on my iPad. It's called GoodNotes 5. And what I do is I just take notes directly on the PowerPoint slide. So there's different colored pens here, and then different width for pens. If you like getting fancy with note taking, you love this. There's definitely tons that you can do, but if you are a simple person like I am, this will work perfectly fine too, because I don't tend to get fancy with note taking, but you basically have everything that you need here. And so there's the pen, and then the eraser is here. This is the highlighter, and then these are just other things here. What you can do is, if you wrote something here and then you feel like you kind of running out of space and you want to move it, you can just kind of drag this over to this side and then work with the space you have here. And then one good thing, or there's many, but one thing that I really enjoy about using this app for note taking is I can import pictures. So let's just say that I downloaded this from Safari. I want a picture of the first rib on here just to help with the understanding of what thoracic outlet syndrome is. And so I can drag this here onto the slide and then use it later for studying. And here's the laser point that I can try to practice presentation when I give presentations. And so, also another thing that I forgot to mention is this undo button at the top. I use Control Z all the time when I'm working on my laptop, and so I love this function. You can just undo everything and then work with that. So yeah, that was GoodNote 5. And then I know there are a lot of alternatives for the Apple Pencil, but this has worked for me so far. Whenever I'm done with note taking or using my iPad, I just slap it on the side of my iPad and it charges automatically. And so I think it's worth the price. But if you have used other alternatives, let me know in the comments what you think. Once I'm done with lectures for the day, I go on to step number 2, which is basically writing out an outline for that lecture. And what I'm trying to do with this step is I'm not trying to study the lecture, and so I'm just trying to get a big picture idea of what the lecturer wants us to understand. And so I'm just categorizing things here. So let's just say thoracic outlet syndrome, and I wrote all these things down. And then for the next topic in the same lecture, for scoliosis, I wrote everything else down. I do this on my PC, my Dell laptop, because I don't have a Magic Keyboard or a keyboard that attaches to my iPad via Bluetooth, and so it's just faster to type that way. Alright, so moving on to the final step of the process. This is like the final round of studying before the exam. I like to go back to GoodNotes, and what I do is I just use a multi-screen feature here. So going from the lecture slide to just the empty note. I like to write things down because this is like the last round of studying and it just sticks with me better that way. But what I try to do is I try to focus on the details, and I try to minimize the things that I write down because that's just more efficient to me. And so what I would do is write down thoracic outlet syndrome and then write down the different types that you can see here. on my note. And with this final step, I also like going back and forth between the study guide or the outline that I made and then the lecture presentation. Sometimes it just makes more sense for me to read this instead of everything that I would have written down here if this was an actual lecture slide. And so I just tend to go back and forth. This is what the general process looks like for me. I tend to study 1 week out before the exam date. That way I can thoroughly go over 3 to 4 lectures a day. But I know, there's some people out there that like to cram, and I have friends that like to cram and they're good at it. So I think it really comes down to what works for you and just looking for different strategies until you find what works for you, and you can just stick with that once you find it. So GoodNotes isn't the only app that I use on my iPad to help with studying. I really like this app called Essential Skeleton. This isn't a paid promotion. If you want to sponsor me, Essential Skeleton, feel free to reach out to me. But basically, this app really helps with musculoskeletal class, especially because I can navigate very easily around and focus on different joints or bones if I want to. I can isolate, let's say, the left clavicle, and so just going through the bone, and then I can also isolate the joints. So let's just say I want to look at the spine, and so here we're isolating it, and then I can zoom in to focus on like a facet joint over here or something like that. And so this is something that I've been using a lot. And there's also YouTube. I know a lot of people don't really correlate YouTube with studying, but there's a lot of educational content out there nowadays, and it's the biggest search engine in the world, so why not try and take advantage of it? And so I've been using it a lot. This is just my video on discussing options for MCL rehab, but yeah, I like using YouTube too. So now that we discussed the general timeline and overview of what studying really looks like in PT school for me, I want to give you guys some tips. 3 main tips that I could think of. Number 1 is to prioritize studying. I know there are tons of stuff that you would like to do before you study or instead of studying, and trust me, I get that 100%. But for me, what worked was working with time commitments, and so finding out what time you work the most efficiently and the time zone that you're the most productive in. And for example, if you work the best at 5 a.m. in the morning when nobody else is awake, or when you work the best at 10 p.m. Closer to bedtime, study then, because that way you can prioritize studying. And right now, I think as students in PT school, at least for the next couple of years, it's important to prioritize studying and learn as much as you can. And so that's what worked for me. All right, tip number 2 is to study with friends. I know some people love doing this, others, they really don't like it. And so it can go either way. I meet up with my friends on Discord before every exam to ask questions, to do a final review session. And it doesn't have to be Discord, obviously. We also have a chat on GroupMe or Facebook Messenger, so we can just toss questions back and forth, and that way we can learn from each other. So I think it's at least worth trying. Tip number 3 is to not stress too much about studying. I know it's super ironic given that I have talked about studying for the exams for the last couple minutes, but you don't have to get the best score on the exam in your class in order to become the best PT. And so what's more important is finding the balance, your work, school, life balance, and learning as much as you can. Of course, give it your best shot and try to learn as much as you can, but don't stress too much about the results, because as long as you pass and you know what you're doing, you should be fine. Alright, so that's a wrap for today. I hope you guys found this helpful. I'll be back with more content next week, and I'll see you guys then. Thanks.